It was one of the most profound events in generations with huge consequences for the American economy.
Is something far worse than a recession on the horizon. Financial expert Patrick Bet-David warns that the economic challenges ahead could be more severe than a typical downturn. But why does he believe this, and what evidence supports his alarming predictions? Most importantly, he outlines how we can prepare. In his analysis, Bet-David paints a bleak picture, but one that is rooted in facts and a historical understanding of the markets. Having begun his financial career the day before the tragic events of 9/11, he's no stranger to volatile markets and global instability. One of the primary indicators Bet-David focuses on is the over-concentration of wealth in a select few companies. At first glance, the stock market may appear healthy, but with indices like the S&P 500 showing positive returns. However, a closer look reveals that the majority of the market's growth is being driven by just 7 companies: Meta, Facebook, Nvidia, Apple, Microsoft, Alphabet, Google, Amazon, and Tesla. These corporations make up nearly 28% of the entire S&P 500 index. This creates a false sense of security, because if these giants were to face a significant downturn, the broader market would collapse alongside them. The disparity between these large-cap economies and smaller firms is stark. While the S&P 500 has shown a positive return this year, the Russell 2000, which represents smaller companies, tells a different story. These smaller companies have far fewer resources and access to capital, making it harder for them to weather the economic storms. Debt is another critical factor in Bet-David's analysis. For the first time in history, U.S. consumer credit card debt has exceeded $1 trillion. This unprecedented level of debt, coupled with rising interest rates, creates a dangerous situation. With the Federal Reserve continually raising interest rates to combat inflation, the cost of servicing credit card debt has reached all-time highs. The average interest rate on credit cards is now above 20%, a record that is pushing many consumers into financial distress. People who are already living paycheck to paycheck are now facing even higher monthly payments, which could lead to widespread defaults and an overall reduction in consumer spending, a vital driver of the U.S. economy. As if credit card debt weren't enough, millions of Americans are also facing the resumption of student loan payments. For the last few years, these payments have been paused, providing some relief to the borrowers during the pandemic. But now, this temporary break is over, and millions of borrowers will have to start repaying their loans. For many, this means finding an extra $300 or more per month, money that they likely don't have. How could rising interest rates and maturing corporate debt lead to a wave of bankruptcies and further destabilize the economy? Corporate debt is another looming crisis. Many companies took advantage of the historically low interest rates over the past decade to take on massive amounts of debt. While this made sense when borrowing was cheap, the situation has changed dramatically. As interest rates rise, these companies will need to refinance their debt at much higher rates. According to Bet-David, more than $1 trillion in corporate debt is set to mature in 2025. The companies that need to refinance will likely face interest rates that are double or even triple what they initially paid, severely impacting their ability to stay profitable. If these companies start to fail, it could trigger a wave of corporate bankruptcies, further destabilizing the economy. Government debt is another ticking time bomb. The U.S. national debt currently stands at over $33 trillion, and as interest rates rise, so does the cost of servicing this debt. Every 1% increase in interest rates adds an additional $320 billion to the federal government's interest payments. Given that the Fed has recently paused its rate hikes, Bet-David suggests that we may be less than a year away from a full-blown recession. This could coincide with the 2024 presidential election, adding a layer of political complexity to an already fragile economic situation. There is, however, a glimmer of hope in the housing market, at least for now. Despite mortgage rates climbing above 7%, home prices have remained relatively stable. This is primarily because many homeowners locked in low mortgage rates during the pandemic and are hesitant to sell, knowing they would have to take on a much higher mortgage payment if they did. However, Bet David warns that this situation is not sustainable in the long term. If rates remain high, it will become increasingly difficult for new buyers to afford homes, which could eventually lead to a housing market slowdown or even a crash. What steps does Patrick Bet David recommend for businesses and individuals to prepare for potential economic challenges ahead? Throughout his analysis, Bet David emphasizes the importance of being prepared. His advice is clear. Now is the time to reduce debt, increase savings, and be cautious with investments. While no one can predict the future with absolute certainty, Bet David argues that the warning signs are clear, and it would be foolish to ignore them. Economic downturns often lead to innovation, as people look for new ways to solve problems and meet changing demands. Entrepreneurs who can adapt quickly and offer solutions to the challenges people are facing during the crisis may find themselves in a position to succeed. But when will this crisis hit? While Patrick Bet David doesn't specify an exact date, he believes we are already in the early stages of economic distress. According to him, several warning signs are emerging that could indicate deeper trouble ahead. These include rising unemployment rates, a steady decline in consumer spending, and a growing number of corporate bankruptcies. Bet David also stresses that these issues are compounded by global factors, such as ongoing geopolitical tensions and disruptions in the global supply chain. Together, these factors could accelerate the onset of a much larger crisis. While the timeline remains uncertain, Bet David suggests that these early indicators warrant close attention, as they may signal a worsening economic environment in the near future. Global factors also play a significant role in Bet David's analysis. Geopolitical instability, particularly tensions between the US and China, adds another layer of uncertainty to the global economy. Trade wars, sanctions, and supply chain disruptions could exacerbate the economic challenges we are already facing. Additionally, the ongoing conflict in Ukraine has had significant impacts on global energy markets, further driving inflation and economic instability. Bet David argues that these global markets are interconnected with the financial issues we are seeing at home, making the situation even more precarious. In conclusion, while many economists and analysts remain optimistic about the future, Patrick Bet David's analysis offers a sobering counterpoint. His warnings about the concentration of wealth in few companies, rising consumer and corporate debt, and the potential for a significant recession following the Federal Reserve's rate hikes suggests that we may be on the brink of something far worse than a typical downturn. Whether or not the crisis materializes in the way Bet David predicts, his analysis underscores the importance of being prepared. It's not just about surviving the next recession. It's about understanding the deeper, systemic issues at play and taking proactive steps to safeguard one's financial future. Whether through reducing debt, increasing savings, or embracing entrepreneurship, there are steps we can take now to mitigate the impact of what may come. Like, share, and subscribe to stay updated on the latest insights from Patrick Bet David and learn how to safeguard your financial future in the face of an impending economic crisis.